Hey there, friends. Welcome into Take Two with Hawk. My twin with gray hair on the other side of the table, that's the Hawk, Dr. Brent Hawkins, Superintendent of Schools. That note will be on my appraisal this year. We've got a special guest for the first time on Take Two with Hawk. In the middle here is Bowie Franks, Business Development at Gallagher Construction.
Yes, sir.
Bowie, appreciate you making the really long drive all the way across the county to be here.
Absolutely. It's a long drive from Gatesville. I appreciate y'all having me.
Bowie is going to help us break down some of the details in school construction that matter and that the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee got to understand and hear them talk about through the process that led to the calling of Bond 2025. But as we start this episode of Take Two with Hawk, we're recording this on Friday, August 22nd. If you're listening to this, we're publishing it on Monday, August 25th. Dr. Hawkins, good things. Fall activities are underway, and you wouldn't have known it was a scrimmage at Bulldog Stadium last night.
Well, and for the record, y'all, I just want to say that Kurtis sent me the memo about coordinating the gray. I thought he meant my hair in this shirt. I didn't know that he meant me and him would dress alike, but he's exactly right. Last night was, it was very energizing. We had a scrimmage, not a game.
Right.
And, there's a lot of kids across the state of Texas, I can assure you, that day in and day out when game time comes, they play in front of a whole lot less people than what was at Bulldog Stadium. The Bulldog Nation turned out. They were engaged, enthusiastic about the upcoming year and cheering on the Dogs, and I thought it was one heck of a successful night, regardless of what the weather was. I thought the cool breeze blowing felt like truly it was the Dogs of fall.
Just channeling your inner Kenny Chesney right there. We'll get into today's program in a minute. We're going to focus today on Bond 2025 and specifically on the construction side of it, answering some of the questions that we have routinely seen on social media and trying to help people make an informed decision. Again, I want everybody to be aware, and this is Texas law, and so we cannot sit here and advocate in any way. We cannot tell you how to vote. We can simply give you the facts to help you as an informed voter when you step into the ballot box this November, and we can answer questions factually. But again, we cannot advocate. We cannot tell you how to vote. We can just encourage you to vote and pass along any factual information. So as we do that, Dr. Hawkins, one more time, that process that the Long Range Facilities Planning Committee went through, this is years in the making at this point, but in this go round with these consultants, this is a several month process. Can you give us one more quick run through of the process that led to the board calling this proposal as we're recording this last week?
Yeah, absolutely. As Kurtis mentioned, this is a long ongoing process, but my experience with it started back when I applied for the job as superintendent. Back in the fall of 2024. And, I had my kids, I got 3 girls that are, they're social media trolls. And so they started looking at it because I wanted to know, hey, I don't know anybody in Coppers Cove. I know about Coppers Cove, but I don't know anybody in Coppers Cove, so tell me about the community. One of those girls come back and said, Dad, they're having a civil war. And I said, well, like a reenactment? And she said, no, over a bond issue. Said there was a bond issue that didn't pass. And she said, I looked back through there and people were very divisive over whether to build a new high school or not a new high school or what to do and everything. And so, fast forward to, I get the job. The board puts in place these goals that, that they wanted me to go through the process with, and that I would be evaluated not on whether this bond passes or fails, but that I went through a process. And I thought that it was extremely important that we do so from a grassroots perspective, that we had a committee that was open to anybody. And I saned to try to get the people on there. And the people that I wanted to get on there were those people with the social media accounts that had so many ideas. I really wanted people who were opposed to the last bond, because I wanted to take their ideas and their commitment to the community and bring them into the process and to get their aspect of what they wanted to see for their community, and to try to make the best decisions with the cards that was on the table. And so we did. We opened it up, and we capped it at 100. And so we had to turn no one away, because 80 showed up. 80 volunteered, 80 committed. I felt like I was back in junior high asking folks to dance at the junior high dance. Some of them said no, and I thanked them for, their consideration, and we went on about our business. But my point is this, is everybody, there's no excuse for nobody that said, hey, I'd like to have been part of it. Well, we opened the doors and was proud to do so, and definitely proud of the committee as they went through, months of several nights and commitment to go through the process and to learn about school finance, to learn about the cost of construction, to learn about all these things. And so before I kicked that committee up, I wanted to research, because I knew that I would get questions asked. And so we hired a new architect firm, not the one that was advising the district in the previous architect, or in the previous bond. I thought it was good for everybody to just get a fresh start. The only people that come in with any type of idea of the last bond was the people who were on the committee that we allowed to stay on the committee, and was glad that they did stay on the committee. But in that process, I was trying to do my homework. And so before we hired the architect, I reached out to, of course, we had the previous architect, and so we had numbers from them. And so I reached out to 2 more architects and talked with them about the feasibility of, it seemed like that in the last bond that there was multiple referendums, because you could vote for a new high school, or you could vote for what the bond committee had, or something else. And in actuality, there was only vote one proposition, yes or no. But I wanted to take all of those other viewpoints and to vet them. And in doing so, I started with the architects. And so then we hired an architect. And then along come Bowie, and so don't take this wrong, Bowie, but I talked to 2 other construction companies, because I wanted to get their feasibility of it. And of course, for the record, I wasn't the only one that applied for the superintendent job, so the board was talking to other people other than me, and so, but unanimously, everybody was pretty unified in what they said about the cost of what it would take to do that. And so, yeah, we brought information in there, and different than the last bond, our long-range facility planning committee, we had an architect, and then in this one, we felt like that it was important to bring the construction agent into the process, because you get more of a efficient outcome in the end. And so when we vetted all of those construction folks that's out there, then Gallagher Construction was the people that we brought on board to do that. And so it wasn't just a grassroots committee, but it was a grassroots committee with experts in the room that are actually building buildings and serving schools all across the state. And so when you look at Gallagher, and I pulled up their Facebook page a while ago, and I counted about 12 or 15 different posts in different districts from all over the state of Texas. I'm talking about Dalhart, America.
Yes, sir.
If anybody's never been to Dalhart, let me tell you, you blink your eye and you out of Texas. That's about as close to being out of Texas as you can be. And so it goes all the way over into Caddo Mills in Louisiana over there. And so large schools, small schools, Farmersville, all the way to Gunner, which is a smaller school, and everything in between. Fast growth districts like Van Alstyne and places like that, they have experience. I mean, they're currently building schools in a multiple sites and facilities and communities across the state, just as our architects, Goodwin Laster, is doing the same thing. And so they were in the room to provide advice and counsel. And then from there, that last July meeting, that committee come together and they made a recommendation, and they brought that recommendation to the board, and then the board took the recommendation of that grassroots committee and has put it out now for the voters.
And again, you can go back on previous episodes of this podcast and you can see the process unfold from the invitation to the constant updates on it. We've tried to be very transparent because we understand that this is an important topic for the community. I've got the feed pulled up here, and so we go all the way back to April 28th, but facilities are explicitly mentioned in the title of the episodes on May 2nd, June 5th, June 25th. It goes on. So we've got, there are previous episodes where you can go and hear some of the more detailed explanations. But what we're trying to do is pivot so that you can understand the current proposal. And so we really wanted to make sure that everybody understood how we got here by the end of this episode, and then move toward focusing on the actual proposal going to the ballot box this November from this point forward. And so with that, you're probably sitting here wondering why are these yahoos sitting in an unair-conditioned room? And I'm starting to wonder the same thing now. But we're sitting in what used to be the wood shop at Coppers Cove High School. And why is that important? Because this is currently a career and technical education workspace. Always has been and is still serving in that capacity, but it's no longer the wood shop because that is in what everybody knows is the CTE building out behind the high school. It houses the industrial trade programs, welding, construction science, all of that stuff. And so what they're trying to use this room for, rather, is it's kind of like a graphic design lab is the easiest way to explain it in an academic term. Think of it more like a print shop. But the print shop is very limited to the t-shirt dryer, the commercial t-shirt dryer that's just behind my right shoulder, and a couple of computers. And so it's a very limited space, but the challenges in this space mirror what a lot of the CTE program deals with.
Absolutely. And, the thing I'd say is this, is I'm highly, we're living in the age of the angry American. Everybody's offended by everything, and everybody's got a social media account. So I'm going to log on to social media and gripe about this because, I come in this facility here, and it is, I think I could go out and coach for Coach Southern and be cooler than it is in here right now. But the thing that offends me the most is Matt and Cole sitting over there behind the camera, and they've made this place look kind of nice. So I hope you jog the pictures across to see what the facility actually looks like. And the reason I'm offended is because they haven't made me look as good as they made this facility.
They haven't done that for me either. They haven't done that for me either. No, and so we wanted to get into it. So let's talk construction. This is something that has changed, I want to say in the last 5 years, probably faster than any other time, but you work in that field more than I do.
Absolutely. You referred to it's changed within the past 5 years. You look at construction costs before COVID compared to now, and those costs have nearly doubled, if not doubled. So, COVID was unprecedented times, obviously. So it's it created, obviously, in your everyday life, you go to the grocery store, gas, anything, building houses. You look at any costs back before the day the earth stood still, and you can see it everywhere. It's essentially doubled. Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad you brought up pre-COVID construction rates, because that's something we've heard a lot lately is, when I was a reporter, I covered 2 large bonds in 2018 as a news reporter near us in Coppers Cove, both building brand new high schools. It wasn't replacement high schools, but they were additional high schools, and they were brand new. Capacity about what the committee was taking into consideration for Copper's Cove High School. One of those was 147 million, and I can't remember if that number included the athletic facility that's on that campus, and I'm not entirely sure what the number was at Lake Belton, but both of those are bonds that were passed in 2018. Is it possible, from a construction perspective, to even build a 2,500 student to 3,000 student high school for 140 something million in 2025?
Man, with inflation and the way the market has gone since that time, you're out of that ballpark. Like I said, materials, labor, codes. You even look at, and we can talk a lot about codes. That'll get me down a rabbit hole. But you look at schools. I graduated high school in 2017. You look at schools, even from a safety standpoint, how much different they were even before COVID to now. So a combination of those materials, labor, and then the programmatic aspect of it, of what modern classrooms look like nowadays, those really drive that up. And unfortunately, it's not getting any cheaper. Just like everything, inflation is still a thing. We're seeing about 1% a month right now in construction. So it's not getting any cheaper, unfortunately.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yeah, I just add, I keep hearing about the Chaparral High School over in Killeen, and I keep hearing about, Belton and all those things. Well, all that stuff was before 2018.
Right.
And, like I say, I'm not advocating one way or another, but I'm trying to put facts out there so that everyone can understand that that's dead numbers. And we can't operate off dead numbers because it gets people fired. The way that I've always approached it is I'm making a commitment that we can do these things for the community. I believe in doing what you say and saying what you mean, and you stand up there and say, hey, this is what we can do with this, and then you have to come back, put your hat in your hand and say, hey, we can't deliver it. And so I think it would just be educational malpractice to not look at more recent things like Dripping Springs, 2,500 students. 2,500 students, grades 9 through 12. That was a May 2025 bond, and the budget was $298,783,000. Architect was VLK. Bowie wasn't building that thing. It was another construction company, but the construction itself was $251 million, and the soft cost was $39 million. And so, when you start looking and comparing in today's numbers, the numbers that the committee had are very relevant. When you think about, we have over 500,000 square foot in our proposed footprint here at the school. So that Dripping Springs School is very close to us. And so those numbers, and here's the other thing. Folks need to not be confused about this, because what they do in Dripping Springs or what they do in Killeen is totally different than what we do in Cove. We offer different things here than they offer there. And so, I know that, I believe, Bowie, did y'all do the Buffalo ISD?
Yes, sir.
So Buffalo, y'all are going over in Buffalo, and the superintendent, he told Mr. Ivey tells me, he said, Hawk, one thing that we didn't take into account for is the programmatic differences in schools. And so, hey, they were elated to get this bond passed and everything. They looked up, and I believe it was something with the science labs. Maybe they offered more science than what the model was. And so it just goes to show you that schools don't all offer the same thing. And I think about Longview High School. Dr. Wilcox is one of the most renowned superintendents in the state of Texas. He would be probably on the Mount Rushmore superintendents if there was a Mount Rushmore anywhere. And Dr. Wilcox has a fantastic meat lab over there, to where they have meat cutters that they're training, and they take the FFA kids' chickens and they process them, or they'll have a beef carcass and they'll process it, all FDA approved and everything. Well, that's an expensive project, expensive part of what Longview does that maybe Pine Tree doesn't do. And so, it's hard to make these comparisons from side to side. And say, well, hey, they did that for this. Well, there is going to be some variance in that. But I think when you listen to experts, Bowie, you listen to Hudson with the architects, and you listen to what other people like Dripping Springs is doing, and don't go back in the past. Let the past be the past. Hey, if we could build a new high school for what they did in 2018, I'd be all on board. But we can't do that. It's impossible. And so, like I say, it's educational malpractice for me to sit here and say, hey, committee, you got it wrong. Let's do something else, because all it does is muddy the water.
When you're looking at renovation versus building new, where does that cost difference come into play?
There's a ton of variables when you're looking at both, really. With renovations, obviously you don't know what you're going to dig up once you get into these buildings, because a lot of public school buildings in Texas, they're added onto, pieced together, effortlessly, all intertwining. So once you get in there and you start renovating stuff, you don't know what you're going to get into. And on top of that, the types of renovations you're doing matter with those costs as well. So there's a lot of ambiguity with those numbers. Are you painting the walls and fixing the ceiling tiles, or are you gutting the walls and moving walls and completely gutting and remodeling it?
And you wouldn't even go down that road if you didn't think, there's buildings that's sitting out there that you need to just tear down. And then there's those buildings that you can, what I keep calling the Chip and Joanna effect. You can go in, have a little demolition day, and you can make a new building. Mm-hmm. But that kind of all depends on the bones of the building too.
Right.
Is the fundamentals okay with the building, or so y'all see some of that?
Absolutely, and obviously all of that's taken into account. The structural integrity of the building, the quality of the bones. Over in McGregor, we're turning dirt over there. It's a pretty cool project. Their junior high, what's going to be their new junior high, is actually an old Dell call center in the front of the building, and we're adding 80,000 square feet roughly on the back of it. But that call center has great bones, so we're utilizing that and adding on the back of it. So creativity that you can do with some good bones is really, it's a really neat deal. And you touched on something earlier, and it makes me want to go back to it, is just looking, you're talking numbers, you're talking soft costs, you're talking hard costs, what those all mean, and then stepping back even a little more, and we're talking about the planning process and how backwards the bond process kind of is. Mm-hmm. You get a committee
I think that's a good thing to point out, because that's another question we've gotten, is the way that school finance is set up so differently mm-hmm. than personal finance, and that's through the legislature. And you bring up a good point. Before you can engage in buying nails and swinging hammers, you've got to come. It's like when you buy a house and you got to get pre-qualified for a mortgage, like Dr. Hawkins mentioned on our last episode. Mm-hmm. You've got to have some money on paper to be able to say, this is what I've got to build this.
Absolutely, and you look at that. It's a backwards process as a whole. So just to run through it, you get a committee together, you bring it to the Board of Trustees, you call a bond, you pass a bond, the architect then begins to design, and then after that architect is done showing us where all the nails and nails go and where all the corners measure, then we'll bid stuff out. So you go back to the planning process. So this community is tasked with looking at numbers and feasibility of something that's not going to bid out until 12 months later.
Yeah.
So that's a challenge. You're pretty much looking into a tuned-up crystal ball. Obviously, you've got consultants and professionals in the field. It's really a backwards process, and then you throw in the middle of that, well, it's got to be voter approved. Well, what's it look like exactly? Well, I don't know yet, because we need the funds for the drawings to begin.
Yeah.
And
It's-
all of that is the courtesy of the Texas legislature
Yeah.
that does this. And so, hey, look, if I was building on the farm and I was fixing to build me a new farmhouse or a big barn, I could do like I read on social media. Where's your 3 bids at? I could go out and I could get 3 contractors, subcontractors to come give me 3 bids, but that's not the way the ed code lays it out. And it's specificity, and every step of this process, from the selection of Gallagher Construction, you have to establish a construction method. And so from the construction method, then you hire the firm, and then like you're saying there, then along the way it gets approved, and then it comes along, and then you guys manage those subcontractors and their bids that comes in. And so, you don't get bids until, you get the money in the bank to be able to do those things.
And once you know what you're building.
Right.
And you talk about hard costs and soft costs, when the committee's putting these numbers together months in advance, you look at the overall budget, you're looking into your crystal ball, and you've got 2 major aspects of what a budget consists of, and that's your hard costs and your soft costs. Your hard costs, it equates to about 75% of the overall budget, and that's your site work, your actual structure, your envelope of the building. And that, that's your steel, your mechanical, electrical, plumbing, your interior, millwork, all the stuff that makes up the building. And on top of that, all of those structures are built to what meets a modern learning environment and what is mandated. Public school construction has an insane amount of codes and regulations that they have to follow, that if I was going to build a house, I don't have to follow any of them. So you take all of that, and it's got to meet, all the technology standards that are required nowadays. You're even to the ventilation of the building. So those make up your hard costs. And then you throw the soft costs on top of that, it's 25%, and that hits you like a hammer. I don't know what's so soft about that, but that's your design fees, your furniture, fixtures, and equipment, all of the furniture, fixtures, and equipment that goes into that, your technology, any testing, permits, any legal check boxes you have to check. All of those make up that overall budget. So when you take a step back and you look at it, there's a lot more that goes into building a school than just throwing up some steel and some classrooms.
And so just to play off that just a minute, it's 19 years ago I was superintendent, and 2 years as deputy director, and through all that I've either been helping or doing something with construction ever since. And so Boo is exactly right. And I give you an example here, and I'm not trying to make light of it, but how hard do you think it is to put turf down on a baseball or softball field? That's pretty simple. It's carpet. At the end of the day, it's fancy carpet that you're putting down there. And yet we don't go to the city of Coppers Cove and pull a permit. We go to the city of Coppers Cove and pull 6 permits. And so just think about that. If a relatively simple project of turf on a field required 6 projects, then what complexity do you have once you start doing all of these other things? Because, there is inherently more issues in that. And then, when he's talking about soft cost and it's 25%, you're like, oh my God, so I'm only getting 75% of the rubber meets the road. Well, all of those bureaucratic hurdles that you have to step over, you've got surveyors and people that come in and hit core samples and take core samples, and then you've got engineers and all of these things. There is a lot of people that have to approve and sign off on things, so that it's not just like building my barn. There's a lot of folks that drive up the cost. The Economic Development Board here in Copper's Cove, I saw a deal a couple nights ago where the average cost per square foot of a home in Cove was $152 a square foot, $152 for just an average residential dwelling. And, you know, I'm sitting there in my living room at the house thinking about, well, I got 3 bathrooms here. And, you know, but the thing of it is it's my wife, me, and 2 bulldogs. That's all the steps that's going through that house. But a place like Cove, you've got 2,300, Cove High's got 2,300 young folks that stepping in it every day. And then you throw the staff on top of it. There's a lot of wear and tear on the floors of these buildings, and so it does have to be made. If you want a building to last 60 years, that's the life cycle of it. And so you have to, I understand there's a different level of, what about the door at my house versus the doors here?
And that's what I was going to throw in there. You mentioned bathrooms as well. All of these little aspects that make up a school building, to something as minute as door hardware. It's got to meet ADA, TAS requirements. If you just look at a door, it's got to meet the safety requirements. It's got to have the hardware. It's got to be fire rated. You look at the bathroom. I would bet in my bathroom, there's a toilet and there's a sink. It doesn't really matter where they are. It's a little tight in there. But when you look at public school bathrooms, they have to meet so many different codes and the clearance requirements for ADA, American with Disability. And then, you got to have grab bars. The plumbing has to be certain distances. The sink has to be in a certain spot. It's all of these little aspects, even to the windows on the exterior of the building. All of these little tiny aspects that go into a school, it's beefed up for a public school.
So you're not building any schools right now for $152 a square foot?
No. I wish.
Yeah,
that'd be awesome.
Hey, sign us up.
Absolutely.
Sign us up.
I wish.
And the other thing is you don't see anything that, everybody says, well, inflation's cooled off some, which, I think to some degree it has, but we're still buying $8 a pound hamburger meat too, and so we got $8 a pound hamburger meat. We know that's what that's doing to the burger places. I think about our insurance. Our insurance increased, property casualty insurance increased in Cove, $200,000 increase in insurance in a year. That is substantial, and so you don't see any walking back to 2018. If Sherry used to have a song, "If I Could Turn Back Time," you don't see deflation happening on any of your crystal balls in construction.
No, it's only the inflation slowing down.
And I think to build on what you're saying, what's important about that is all that means is that line is less straight up. It's more like a slant, but It's still building on. So it's like compound interest working against you, like the economists will say. It's 1% of what the new number is on top of what that new number was, and so it's growing by that. But just because it's not going straight up anymore doesn't mean it's not going up.
Right. Exactly. We were seeing about 2% a month right after COVID. Super aggressive, and then it just instead of here, now we're there.
Yeah.
So
I've heard this come up, and so I want to ask, when it comes to put the possibility of tariffs with some of the supplies for it, like you think about steel studs in the wall, steel beams running through the ceiling, through the walls. How big of a concern when it comes to construction cost are tariffs at the moment, or the risk of or the possibility of tariffs?
Yeah, it's definitely created some volatility in the market. We've got a whole estimating team, and we're a part of a Cumming group, and they're an international cost estimating program management firm across the seas, but they're international, and they're able to track down to the commodities the percentage of how things are tracking. So they're constantly tracking, all of those raw materials, your steel, your glass, your lumber, you name it, labor even. So we're able to, I say a crystal ball, it's not just a shot in the dark. Our estimating team and the resources that we're able to utilize, we're able to really dive deep into those kind of things and project, project these budget numbers to the best of our ability.
When you look at some of this other stuff, what are the other materials that people may not think of when they hear school construction that add up and lead to a new building being so expensive, or a renovation to a building like what's proposed here at Copperas Cove High School being so expensive?
Yep. You combine all of your raw materials, and I think what really gets you is the spaces that you're building. You got your steel, you got your drywall, you got your mechanical systems like your HVAC, you got your electrical, all the basic stuff that builds any building, but it's the spaces that you're building. And you're not just building open rooms like the one we're in now. You're building gyms, you're building science labs, you're building CTE. CTE has taken off drastically since I've graduated high school. It's the spaces that you're making, and the codes, obviously we've touched on that, the codes that you've got to follow that make that. Those spaces themselves require much more cost than it would to build an open, just an open commercial space for an office. They have lighter codes and regulations to follow than what schools do. So I think when you're thinking about what really drives up those costs is things like that. It's the spaces that you're building and how you have to construct them. They've got to house all of the modern spaces that are standard. It even goes down to the size of the classrooms. You look at a 1980s building, things aren't the same as they were in the 1980s. So the codes are different. So there's discrepancies all through there that have to be brought back up.
Which nothing is highlighted or accentuated anymore than when this building that we're sitting in today was built. You basically had ag and home ec. And so, home ec is it's morphed into so much more. And so you've got culinary now. And then I keep telling folks we've got these residential ranges that our kids are cooking off of, that they're preparing these meals off of, and yet you go to Academy over there, Academy ISD, and they've got a brand new industrial kitchen for those kids. So when our kids go to competition, guess what? Their kids got laptop computers and we got Big Chief tablets. Guess who's going to win that? And so, but we can't retrofit that room because of codes. We do not have the ventilation, and so therefore our kids are in a facility that other kids are in facilities that prepare them for what they're going to see out in the real world when they get into the workforce.
Does it add any challenges whenever you go in to renovate a high school like this one that was not built as a high school? Because one thing if there's someone in town who's lived in town 20, 30 years, they only know this campus as Copperas Cove High School, but when it opened in 1975, it was J.L. Williams Junior High. It switched sites with what was the high school and is now Copperas Cove Junior High in 1985. Does that add, especially with where CTE is now, and we've given the stats on this podcast about where CTE stands in CCISD and in the state of Texas, but with that kind of growth, you got a 50-year-old campus that wasn't intended when it was constructed to be a high school. What does that add any challenges?
Absolutely, and that's where those architects get real creative when they're designing. Because once you touch a certain amount of existing building, you have to bring everything else up to standard around it. So when you have spaces that were built in 1975 that are smaller, that the codes of just the classroom itself, the actual size is inflated now. You combine that with all all the other codes, that creates some serious challenges, and that's where those architects have to get real creative, or you weigh out your options, you know.
Yeah.
So, Boy, I just say this to say that, I named off, and y'all can look on Facebook and see where Gallagher is and everything, and y'all have built some rather large buildings. I know you built Waxahachie High School.
Yes, sir.
When did y'all build that?
That was 2018, I believe.
2018. So, I'm sure those numbers on that campus looks a whole lot like Chaparral High School numbers per square footage. And then you've built a ninth grade center over at what was it, Crandall or?
Yes, sir. And that was a renovation.
Okay, so programmatically, you've seen really a shift away from those ninth grade centers, and there's some people that's building them. I know Conroe's having to build some just because of the way, you have to do things with the card you're dealt sometimes. You're not doing things because it's the best educationally or it's the best plan. It's just, hey, this is a solution for this, and you have to go do that. But you and I have talked about if we took 750 kids out of the school and we went and built a $60 to $70 million ninth grade center, and that the challenges of doing so become, number one, logistically, and that $60 to $70 million does not include the land, the parking lots, the utilities, or any of those things. But it definitely doesn't include the ancillary things that you would have to have. And if you did that, you're kind of isolating your freshman class. In Cove, we have young men and young women that are on the high school varsity band, marching band. And so, those kids would have to get back and forth. And so that's why I believe that a lot of districts that went away from that is because of the logistical nightmare of getting those kids back and forth. But the other part of it is this: you spend $70 million plus all of those other things that I mentioned, and then you still got to come in and renovate this school for the other students that are there. And so you don't really duck the renovation in that scheme, though, do you?
No, and I think you bring up a good point, is other districts around Texas, ninth grade centers, typically, and I can't speak for all districts, every situation is different, but typically they build them when, like you said, they have to. Their high school is landlocked. They're facing some growth and, things like that. So they've got to go on a new site and move some kids out. I feel like they only do that when they have to.
So there's not some district that's out here that's, sitting out here and just says, hey, we think this is the best model for our kids. Let's go do this. It's more of a reactionary step than anything.
More times than not, they're growing faster than they can keep up with, and they're landlocked.
Yeah.
And if you look at it, if you're looking long term, it has the potential to create problems in the future. Not the immediate future, but, well, what are we going to do with this ninth grade center once it's 20 years down the road? Then that creates programmatic issues for the district. And then you're back in the same boat of, well, back to the drawing board, what do we need to do now?
Well, I think from a person who is very passionate about skills, crafts, and trades, it's encouraging to see what's going on in the state right now, like you say, with the CTE and how that's exploded. But CTE, even a few years ago, with the state mandates of 4x4 and things like that, kids were really only hitting their electives in their juniors and senior years. And so we have pivoted and shifted as a profession to where now those CTE classes are pushed down into junior high. And so that ninth grade center, you don't duck being able to have that wood shop or metal shop or whatever the case may be CTE wise. Just because you build that center, you're going to have some redundancy of services.
Absolutely. Those spaces are really what's going to drive, like I said, the types of spaces you're building drive up that cost more. And just like you said, ancillary facilities, even, repeating staff. You got to staff those buildings. So you're doubling up on a high school campus of how much staff you have to put in there. And I think it's interesting, and y'all can speak to this a lot more than I can, but just the shift. I'll take it back to when I was in high school. It was ag and home ec, like you said earlier. And the main push was go to school, go to college, get a degree, get a job from there.
Yep.
The shift since then has been super aggressive towards the workforce. Like you said, your trades, your electricians, your plumbers, your culinary industry, industrial culinary, little things like that have really just taken off. But these districts these districts around Texas have to build for that, Mm-hmm. So it's taken a big shift, and y'all can speak to that more than I can.
Well, yeah, you think about the digital media program at the high school, and we work with those students. Our department works with those students very closely because they do a really good job. But the last time my wife wanted family portraits taken with our little one, I remember how much I Venmo'd that person, and we got the friends and family discount, and it still hurt. And so I think about that, and you can make really good livings doing so much now that ties into those CTE programs. And it's not just here's how to swing a hammer, here's how to cook an omelet. It's, there's an entrepreneurship pathway in the CTE program here. There's a teaching and training where it's not just here's how to be a K-12 teacher. It's here's how to run a daycare center. Mm-hmm. There's so much more that goes into CTE than automotive, than construction science, than welding that some people don't think about, and they need specialized spaces too, like we've talked about programmatically.
Absolutely.
And when you look at the process, and you mentioned that, it's a backward process. You're bidding it out a year after voters say yes on any bond election. It's about a year, and now you're bidding out materials, projects, those things. What does that process look like? I know you outlined it a little bit for the Board of Trustees whenever you came down and spoke with them, but just kind of the high notes of it. And you can go find that meeting. I believe that was in July.
Yes.
So that'd be the July regular workshop on the CCISD YouTube channel. But for those who weren't at that meeting, who haven't seen it on YouTube yet, that bid process, what does that look like on the back end of this if voters approve a bond election, not just here in Copper's Cove, but anywhere in the state of Texas?
Yep. So how we do it, we specialize in public construction just within Texas. So the way we operate with our bid process is the most transparent way you can do it. So how we do that is once we get those construction documents, we're putting together bid packages in the most efficient phases as possible. And then we're blasting out those bid packages, opening up the bid to anybody and everybody that bids on it. Our bids that come in, they have to be bonded and insured and capable to do the work. We've got a whole staff that proofs that. We blast those out on every media that there is, any software, newspaper, you name it. So we're able to get the most competitive prices as possible. And then we take those bids, they're sealed. We take those bids and we open those in front of the district. And the district is able to see every single dollar that goes in and out of the projects. And ultimately, it's the district's decision on who is awarded these trades. And that's the beauty of the transparency is if there's somebody local that's been a huge supporter of the community, the district's actually able to award them that work there, and then from there we manage it just like any other construction manager does. We got our job site trailer, our fencing, our on-site supervision, and we're making sure that everything's on time and within budget as we're going through there.
So this is another question we've heard a lot lately, and it's, okay, what does that say? Say the voters approve it. So November 5th comes along, and then they canvass the votes, and let's say that voters approve it, and now it's time to swing hammers, bring out jackhammers, run pipe and electrical. With a school that has students in it, obviously safety is the first and foremost thing on everybody's mind, including y'all's in those instances. And it's not an easy thing to navigate when you've got 20-something hundred students on a campus that you're trying to do some work on. So what decisions and what goes into how you guys handle that? And then when, how do you time out those projects as well? Because obviously, you can't go in there on the first day of school, tear down a wall of the cafeteria and start working on expansion. That's one of the projects proposed here. So how does that play out in a place where you can't shut it down, but you got to do the work?
So that's where you got to get really creative, and like you said, it'll get uncomfortable at some times. We work really closely with the districts and the architects to ensure that the phasing is done correctly in a safe way, and that we're getting the most bang for our buck out of those phases. So obviously every plan's different. So we work closely with the district and any stakeholders in making those decisions on how to phase things out, what makes sense, and what's the most efficient way to go about it in all cylinders.
I've equated it, and I want you to tell me, is this right, wrong, or in between? In my mind, I think of like a shopping mall. The few that are still hustling and bustling. My wife likes to go to them. And so every time you go through and you see a store that's being renovated into a new store, and you see that wooden temporary wall at the front kind of blocking it and saying, hey, pardon our dust, that's kind of what runs through my mind. Is it a little more nuanced than that, or is that?
Yes, it varies, obviously. But, yeah, everything's, safely secured. No kiddos are able to access any sort of construction during those phases. Again, it's a case-by-case deal that it's very fluid, and obviously safety is first and foremost especially when you're dealing with kiddos in a school building. So
and Dr. Hawkins, you've said that if there's no cost limits on anything, building off-site is obviously your first choice because it's the easiest.
First gun you draw in the gunfight, but poor people have poor ways. I grew up poor. I'm still a poor kid. That's everything I do is try to be from a very frugal standpoint because of who I am as a person. But we also know that you have a limit. You limit on what you can do. And, unless, like I was saying earlier at one of our civic groups, unless I win the lottery, I can't do this, and
right.
So our school district has a limit there of financial capacity, and they can't go beyond it. And you can't fund balance yourself out of it. And the state of Texas, the way that the legislature, no one likes taxes. I get it. But in the state of Texas, the only way that we can do anything with capital projects of any scope is to do bonds. And so here we are. You can't fund balance yourself. You can do some things through fund balance, but the overall scope is very limited in that.
When you look at what are some other misnomers that may be out there about school construction that you see come up, given the amount of work? I know you said earlier today you were in a completely different part of the state working on another proposal that's going to a community. And so when in all these communities that you're in working with school districts, what are some other construction misnomers that people don't think about when they think about the complexities of building a school?
I think it's the complexities of building a school. I think the main hurdle is, and you can't blame anybody. It's a whole different world. Really, that residential versus public school, specifically construction, the disconnect there, it's super complex. And before I was in this space, it would have went right over my head. Well, why can't I build it for that much? So I think that's the biggest hurdle when you're talking about public school construction is just the differences. Just like we've talked about this podcast, is all the complexities and the state mandates and the codes and the standards that you have to meet when you're building these facilities compared to residential or even just regular commercial.
Dr. Hawkins?
That's all I've got. I just, I would just say that, we can't advocate for or against, but we want to make sure that we get the facts out there. And I know that the communications department is working to stand up a website to where that we can answer further questions about the proposal. I know that communications is also planning various roundtable discussions, or what some folks would call town hall meetings. We call roundtable discussions. The invitation is open. I'll come talk to anybody, anywhere, any groups around that want to genuinely be informed about what we're trying to do. I've been to several groups this week and look forward to getting out and talking to more folks about that. And so, again, there's a situation there to where you've got 3 propositions on the ballot, and one of the common questions that I keep getting asked is do you have to vote equally for all of them? The answer is no. You can vote yes on all 3, you can vote no on all 3, or you can split your votes, and it's kind of like a buffet. You can pick what you want or leave what you don't. So I just wanted to make that clear. But hey, we appreciate your time at Gallagher Construction. We look forward to our relationship because regardless of what happens on the bond, I know the board is committed to doing some things in fund balance, and in the next 30 days, we'll kind of start defining those and getting those going as well.
Yeah, and to pull the curtain back on what Dr. Hawkins was talking about, and I feel like as Director of Communications, I can kind of shine a light on some of that, is that website, we're working with attorneys to make sure that we don't cross any lines, because we want to make sure, okay, this is factual, that we're not doing anything we're not supposed to be doing, and that's important to us, and we know it's important to the community. And so, there are words that get it, and so we did everything we can, but sometimes you need that attorney to go through and comb through and make sure that you did it right. And so that's what we're waiting on, to have that website up. And so as soon as we get the green light from legal counsel, we'll go through, we'll have that live, and we'll post that on social media for you guys as well, to be able to find that website. And the other thing, we're working through the formatting of those roundtables, like Dr. Hawkins said. We're planning 3. Those will start mid to late September. And there will be 3 of those community meetings. And then, like Dr. Hawkins said, if you want the Kurtis and Dr. Hawkins Roadshow to visit your civic group, we'll both be there and be part of making sure that everybody's got all the information. And I know we said this last time, don't hesitate to email us. We're happy to answer questions to the best of our ability and tell you what we can or can't say. And make sure that everybody has everything they need to be able to make an informed decision whenever the polls open October 20th for the November election. Bowie Franks, Gallagher Construction, appreciate you.
Absolutely.
Hopping on this podcast.
Thank y'all for having me. I appreciate it.
For producers Matt Thompson and Cole Witter, who are sitting behind the camera and not out of the spotlight even still. For Superintendent Dr. Brent Hawkins, and for Bowie Franks, I'm Curtis Quillen, Director of Communications, saying thanks for joining us on this episode of Take 2 with Hawk. We'll see you next time. Good night, and go Dogs.